Before we start out today's video, allow me to make it very clear that Japanese mythology has had and continues to have an incredibly profound impact on Japanese culture as a whole. Therefore, you've probably heard some of these names and story beats before because you're a sad weeaboo who thinks watching anime gives them a profound understanding of Japanese culture. I'd advise you to temporarily forget everything that you have ever learned from this bastardized variation of Japanese mythology and just listen to this video for what it is and not what your waifu dictates it to be. But thanks for watching. Now, like most creation myths not hampered by historical editing or some other dominant missionary religion, Japan's creation story is a little bit muddy, especially when it comes to its early origins, simply due to the fact that aside from some of the more major stuff, there are multiple different accounts for these stories. Most sources say that in the beginning there was a heaven and the earth, but they were formless and malleable, floating on the surface of the waters like a slab of animal fat, or as most sources put it, a jellyfish. Takamagahara, or the heavens, served as the breeding grounds for the three primal deities: Ame no Mina Kanushi, the heavenly center lord, Takamimu Subi, the high generative force, and Kami Musubi, the divine generative force. Collectively, these three are known as the Zoka Sanshin, and are referred to as Hitorigami, which are deities born without gender and are produced asexually, without the need for any male or female gods to do the no pants dance. Though no sources I was able to find were able to point to how exactly the Zoka Sanshin came into being, a possible explanation lies in the alternate accounts which profess that in the beginning, just like with the Chinese, there was a gigantic egg, within which resided all things in a swirling vortex of chaos. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar. And while you may want to chalk all that up to Chinese influence on the Japanese mythos, it's not the only thing the Japanese borrowed from the Chinese, as we'll be discussing later on in this video. Basically what you need to know is that China had a massive influence on the development of Japanese culture, and so I feel that these parts at least deserve a mention in the video. Anyway, getting back to the creation story, the gelatinous blob, which is the earth, sprang reed shoots, which became two more gods. Oh my god. Uma Shia Shikabi Hi Koji, god of energy and, quote, excellent reed shoots. Okay. And Ame no Toko Tachi, the god of heavenly standing. It's important to note that these two incredibly hard to pronounce gods are also Hitorigami. And while they were born after the Zoka Sanshin, none of the references I uncovered said anything about the previous three kami influencing the creation of the latter two, and in fact professed that they were all a part of the same generation of gods known as the Kami Yo Nananyo. Then came the second generation of kami, which consisted of yet another pair of Hitorigami, Kuni Noto Kotachi and Toyoku Mono. Since these gods were finally born with genitals, they could finally get down to business and start producing gods the more typical way. And so the third generation came around, consisting of Uni-jini and Su-hi-jini, who produced the fourth generation, Su-no-gu-hi and Iku-gu-hi, who smashed and made the fifth generation, Oho-to-noji and Oho-to-nobi, who likewise produced the sixth, Omodaru and Ayakashi Kone, who then finally birthed the seventh generation of kamis, the one that we actually care about. Izanagi, he who invites, and Izunami, she who invites. The variation of this myth leaning on Chinese influence is far more condensed and doesn't make any mention of the previous 6 generations of kami. In this version, the lighter and heavier halves of the chaos separated, with the dark and edgy side settling to form the earth, while the lighter and purer side became the heavens. These halves were known as Yin and Yo, respectively, or as they are more commonly referred to, Yin and Yang, another traditionally Chinese concept. And from these two halves there were born two kami by the name of, surprise surprise, Izanagi and Izanami. So the elder kami decided one day that the earth needed some structure and order to it, and so they tasked Izanagi and Izanami to fix this with a fancy jeweled scepter by the name of Ama no Nobuku. However, the elder gods didn't exactly give the two an instruction manual, so they stood on the heavenly bridge for a while and wondered what to do with the waters of In. That's the earth, for those of you not keeping track. However, as they retrieved Ama no Nobuko from the water, a drop spilled off and became the island of Onogoro-jima, which the two gods eagerly descended upon, finally and anticlimactically completing their task. There on the island, Izanagi confessed that as the embodiment of Yo, he felt that he was too full inside, while Izanami stated that as the embodiment of In, she felt completely empty inside. And so Izanagi decided to fill that hole, both literally and figuratively, if you know what I mean, by proposing to Izanami in marriage. Keep in mind that this would be the 6th time that the Japanese gods would produce incest babies, making the family tree look more like a family stump. Evidently, this finally had some consequences for the first time ever in any mythology, as their first child, Ibisu, or as he was later called, Hiroko, comes out a deformed mess without any bones or limbs, and was referred to as a leech child. And so they built a boat and sent him on his merry way. After they tried again with absolutely no luck, Izanami and Izanagi consulted the elder gods as to what exactly went wrong. And according to them, it was because they performed their wedding ceremony incorrectly. You see, Izanami and Izanagi had to walk around the entire earth and then meet one another at the halfway point. In more merciful accounts, it was just a pillar. When they did meet up, however, Izanami spoke first, saying, "What a fine young man." Evidently, this cursed the entire marriage because Izanagi was supposed to speak first because he's the male, and also because ancient Japan was just about as sexist as the rest of the world at the time. However, this isn't nearly as bad as the Chinese-influenced version, where Hiroko is never even born and Izanagi just tells Izanami that she's a stupid bitch and that they need to start all over again. This is probably a good time to mention that things don't ever get any better for poor Izanami, as we'll touch up on later. So as foretold by the elder gods, Izanagi and Izanami did the whole thing over again, this time with Izanagi speaking first, and that seemingly fixed the incest issue. After consummating the marriage, Izanami gave birth to the 8 major islands of Japan: Awaiji, Shikoku, Oki, even though that's a group of islands, Kyushu, Iki, Tsushima, Sado, and most importantly, Honshu, where Tokyo is located. Interesting side note, at the time of the Kojiki's publishing, Hokkaido and the Ryukyu Islands weren't discovered yet. Therefore, they were left out of the creation myth. Izanami was then said to give birth to 6 minor islands before moving on to give birth to the 8th generation of gods. Those of the winds, trees, mountains, rivers, seas, and plains, none of which are significant enough for me to mention, with exception to Kagusuchi, the kami of fire. Now naturally, as the god of fire, Kagusuchi was born a blazing hot baby who literally gave his mother fatal 3rd-degree burns as she was trying to birth him. This caused Izanami to vomit up even more gods, and when Izanagi cried for her death, his stream of tears brought forth another goddess, and then because he's a massive dickhead, when he chopped off his infant son's head for killing his wife, Kagusuchi's blood made up even more gods. And then Izanagi stubbed his toe and made another god, and then he hogged a loogie at the ground and made yet another god, and then he was audited by the IRS, so then he combed his hair and made the god of accounting. I think you get the picture here. There were a shitload of gods created on this day, and I cannot be bothered to name all of them, only the significant ones, which I can promise you we are eventually going to be getting into. So Izanami, unsurprisingly, died a horrible and painful death, and so Izanagi went to Yomi, the Japanese underworld, to try and fetch her. Now, it's important to note that the Japanese underworld is incredibly dark, and so Izanagi was unable to see where he was going down there, so when he did meet up with Izanami, he was unable to see her, but he could still hear her. By the way, this next part sounds like a copy-paste of the Greek myths surrounding Persephone and Orpheus, which I may or may not get into covering in the future. So Izanami tells Izanagi that she can't come home yet because she has already eaten at the hearth of Yomi, and it's kind of a rule that you can't leave once you've eaten there, kind of like a graduation party. Nevertheless, Izanami promises to see what she can do by negotiating with the gods of Yomi, but wants Izanagi to promise her that he wouldn't try to look at her until she was ready to return to the world of the living. Izanagi, having the intelligence and the respect for others of a stray cat constantly meowing at my window at 3 in the morning, no seriously, fucking quit it! Decides to do exactly the opposite and follows her down into the darkness, breaking off a tooth from his comb and then lighting it on fire using it as a torch. Only to see that his wife has been reduced to a rotting, maggot-infested corpse. Izanami, finally having enough of Izanagi's shit, angrily chases after him, with the maggots infesting her body, falling out, and turning into the thunder god Raijin, who is so friggin' cool he deserves a video onto himself. Izanami has Raijin and several other warriors of Yomi, pissed off at the fact that he disturbed the darkness of the underworld, give chase to Izanagi, who tries to diverge their attention by tossing food at them, which works on everyone for the most part except Izanami, who continues to pursue her now ex-husband/brother up until he escapes Yomi and then seals it up with a gigantic rock. Izanami then proclaims her hatred for Izanagi and says that as atonement for his actions, she will kill 1,000 people per day. To which Izanagi countered by creating Barry White music and then saying that he will cause 1,500 babies to be born every day. And from that day forward, Izanami rebranded herself as Yomotsu Okami, or the Goddess of the Dead. Okay, we're done with that joke. Izanagi, satisfied that he finally put his woman in her place, decides to go and take a bath at the island of Tsukiji, where it is said that even more deities are born from him taking his clothes off? This has got to be the lamest creation story for any god ever. It's important to note, however, that once Izanagi gets into bathing, he actually does create some worthwhile gods. By wiping his left eye, he gave birth to the female Hitorigami of the sun, Amaterasu. Then, by wiping his right eye, he created the moon god, Tsukiyomi. And finally, he blows his nose and creates Susanoo, the kami of the seas, who will also go on to become a massive problem child for the rest of the Japanese pantheon. But that is a story that will be covered in part 2 of this creation story in, say, about a week or two. I don't want to make any promises. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out when that video finally does drop, and also be sure to check out my other videos and leave me some suggestions in the comment section below to let me know what I should be covering next on my channel. And until next time, I'm Asai's and Mythologies, and yeah, I realize half these names were used in Naruto. You filthy weeb scum.